Alright, on my first YouTube video, I'm going to be building a desk for my office. Desperately needed. I'm currently working on a old closet door that I found. I moved into this house a few months ago, and what better way than to start with a spalted ambrosia maple slab. So I got this 12-foot slab here. I'm actually going to be using part of this top for a cabinet top that's going to sit to the right of the desk, and that'll be shown in a later video. So I'm first going to start by taking my Craig straight edge and using that as a guide for my 36 volt Makita circular saw. The saw is actually pretty powerful and handles it pretty well. It takes about 4 passes to go through about a 2-inch thick slab. Once I have that straight edge, I can use that to reference the other long edge of the slab. No dust collection yet, so I'm just making an absolute mess of the shop, but too excited to not do it. And this cross cut here at the end, I'm just taking off about 6 inches off the end. I'm just using some clamps and a 4-foot level? Looks like a 4-foot level. And this will be about 4 passes every cut I make. That blade's a little bit dull too, so not good. So here I have an offcut from that long edge that I cut, and I'm just trying to find a way to, one, save money on epoxy, because that stuff is expensive, and just add some more character to the piece. It's kind of a straight piece here at the end that there's not too much character going on, and so this is really the only spot for it at the end, but I try to make something happen. Sometimes you can't. And now to the best part, which is cleaning up the bark. It's the worst part. I was being sarcastic. Yeah, I just grab a dull DeWalt chisel that you don't really care about and just hack away at it. I wouldn't do this if that edge there was being shown, but I'm going to end up filling this with very dark black epoxy. So there's going to be no like opacity to it. So you will not see, like, if I gouge it, I probably gouge it plenty of times here. You don't really see that. For whatever reason, this bark was actually really hard to get off. A lot of times I can just peel it off in one go, but I'm used to working with walnut, so I'm not sure if that's a characteristic of maple. I haven't done a table with a maple slab yet, but I just thought that was interesting. I do leave a little bit of the bark on in the end. So I have a couple chisels here. I have the good old Harbor Freight one. Got a cheap one that I've had for years, that DeWalt one. And it's just time consuming. But I go all the way around with the chisel, and then I start sanding with 100 grit sandpaper just to get those high spots out and make sure there's no anything loose in there that isn't that the epoxy will bond to. I don't want there to be any cracking, any bubbles. I don't care what anyone says. It's just better to take the time to sand off a lot of that bark. It's just not worth it when you're spending, hundreds or even thousands of dollars on the slab and the epoxy and taking all that time, and next thing you know, you look down, you got a bubble or a crack 6 months later. It's not worth it. So I always take the time to do that. And this is the final result of chipping away and sanding away that bark a little bit. You don't want to go too fine of sandpaper on this. I just did it to clean up some loose stuff. So I mean, you can even stop at 60 or 80 grit, but it's looking pretty ready to go. I have some rotting that you just saw there too that I had to get out with the wire wheel drill attachment. So I wanted to make sure everything is solid that is going to be bonding to the epoxy. So once that's done, your slab is all cleaned up and ready to go. It's just a matter of building the mold. I like to put caulk. So this is just the base mold, and I built the bottom piece of the mold there corresponding to the size of the desk that I want. So I always like to put caulk on the side so it really seals it up. Some people just slap that side piece there and put the caulk, they just shove the caulk in the corner with their finger, but I like to spread the caulk on the side of the melamine there, and then I'll go ahead and put some more on after. So I just tack it in with some brad nails, and then I'll come in later and screw everything in tight. I was panicking a little bit here. I had a friend store his car in my garage for about a month because I'm a nice guy. But doing the same thing to this back wall. And you want to make the height of that at least half an inch. I should have went taller here, but at least a half an inch taller than where the slab is going to protrude. So you have something to hit with a hammer once you need to demold everything. That's how I like to make the caulk look before I put on the border walls there. Then next, like I said, I'm just pre-drilling some holes. You have to pre-drill with melamine. You will blow it out if you don't. It still might crack at times, so just something to be mindful of. And just putting in some wood screws every, I don't know, probably about 8 to 10 inches. And here's the last step. So I'll put the caulking in the corner there, but I really press hard in there. You don't want there to be any caulk sitting on that surface still, because it'll get in your epoxy. It'll make your slab not sit flat on the bottom of the mold. And then the last thing here is putting the caulk on the actual slab to create like a dam so that epoxy doesn't go underneath the slab. I did have this flattened before putting it in this mold, but it's still not perfect. So you just don't want the epoxy to go underneath the slab and have it float. Don't mind my dirty outfit over there. This is all after work, so I just kind of come in the garage when I feel like working on this. So here I am spraying some mold release in there. I've used Tyvek tape and all that other tape, and it's just time consuming and it's a pain in the ass. So I found this mold release to be really useful and saves time. It's a lot cleaner, cheaper. So once I put the slab down, I'm just applying pressure on it. Unfortunately, I did not include this in the video. I must have just forgot, but the next step is to level the mold. So you can see here that I have clamps, first of all, applying downward pressure on the slab so that the slab doesn't float and epoxy doesn't go underneath, just an extra insurance. And then also I've leveled the mold. So I took a 4-foot level and just made sure everything was level back to front and side to side. I mixed about 4.5 gallons of epoxy mixed with some black mica powder and some black alcohol dye. You don't want to use like an acrylic paint or anything like that with epoxy, because one, it'll just kind of chunk up, and two, worst case scenario, it could mess with the curing of the epoxy. So you want to use something alcohol based when it comes to your dyes and pigments. And I'll include a link in the description to everything I use that I recommend. There's a couple things I've used that I wouldn't recommend, so just definitely it'll save you guys some headache that I've gone through. Now I do like to go through and pop some bubbles, even though it's a deep pour epoxy. It technically doesn't need it, but just kind of a good habit. I gave it a little bit more than 72 hours to fully cure, and here I go with the demolding process. I'm just unscrewing all those screws that I put in the mold, just taking a 2x4 to help me hit those side borders out. And they are going to break, just let it happen. I do save some of this melamine, but most of it is kind of trash. So this one demolded pretty well. I didn't have too many problems with it. Like I said, I just moved in, so don't judge me too much. I'm lacking a lot of tools, workbenches. I really needed an office desk. I work from home about 50% of the time during the day, so I needed something nice to work on. And I'm just taking that same chisel that I used to remove the bark and just slowly starting from one end and lifting the slab out of the mold. There's no really reason to worry about gouging it or anything. I know people are going to get nitpicky with everything I'm doing, but you're going to sand off any gouges, anything. I could go, I don't know, probably 1/8 of an inch deep on a gouge, and you won't see it. So, but came out really clean. I'm using super clear epoxy, which I've tried. I've tried a lot of them. Tried Epoxy, Marine Pro, and super clear for the money is the best. And here you'll see the epoxy slab winning round 1 of this fight. I thought it was stuck. I thought the epoxy stick stuck to the mold, but it was giving me more trouble than other tables I've built. But with some chisels and some shims and some patience, there it is. Finally get it out. It did get underneath the caulk a little bit, but it would have been much worse if I didn't put that caulk there. And you can finally see it kind of starting to take shape. So it's an exciting part when you demold. And so I actually bought a Kreg track saw in the middle of this project. The circular saw just wasn't cutting it. This saves so much time. I don't know how I did any of this stuff without it, because I was just using a circular saw and some straight edges. So I'd like to do a full review on this once I get some more time with it, but for this project, this thing is awesome. Still took 3 passes with it. It is a little bit underpowered if you're doing, consistently thick slabs with it, but I have no problem with how much power this thing makes. Even with good dust collection, you still get a lot of epoxy flying around, I think because it's heavier than the wood shaving, so. But dust collection is really nice on this. It probably looks like I'm cutting in the middle of the desk, but this is where the desk is going to end and the cabinet that I'm going to build is going to start. Now I've made about a dozen of these tables now, and I learn something new and get better every time. And so I went over to John's Urban Timber in Whitmore Lake in Michigan. So if there's anyone from that area and they're within driving distance of John here, he did a great job. I originally wanted to come in and requested him to plane the slabs flat, which he can also do. But he said I did a great job with the mold, and it was flat enough to where he could run it through the drum sander. So he starts with a 120, and by the end he ends up with 180 grit. So it's a pretty smooth finish, and it needs very little sanding by the time he's done with it. When I get the slab back to the garage, I start by using the Kreg corner guide set. It's a really cool tool. I would not recommend using it with anything other than a trim router, so it gets a little wobbly when you need to use 2 hands on a larger router. But it was my first time using that one. And then came through once those corners were set in and sanded. I just put a nice 1/4 inch round over. I think if I could go back, I would do an 1/8 inch round over on the top and a 1/4 inch on the bottom. It's just more radius than I needed. Still looks great, but like I said, I'm learning from every table I build. I did get a little bit of burning on the radius edge from the router. I have a cheap roundover bit on there. I think mine was Ryobi, kind of a cheap set from Home Depot. Then the last step is just filling these little pinholes. This is actually from an ambrosia beetle, which is actually where the species gets its name from. It creates a beautiful effect, but it's obviously not good for the wood. So I'm just filling these with some medium CA glue and some activator, and that hardens nice. And I come through with a chisel and then sand it down. Little warning here, I'm going to put a picture of that ambrosia beetle on the screen just to gross you guys out a little bit. Yeah, that is the bug that burrows through the wood. So once I'm filling all the different little pinholes with the CA glue and get everything flat, I come through with the 6-inch Bosch orbital sander. This thing is great for sanding large surfaces, and the dust extraction is great on it too. But just kind of using some long sweeps there. You see me stop a little bit just to make sure I'm getting those spots where I filled the CA glue down and all flat. And there I am losing the battle with the hose and cord. So I need to get a better setup. And I'm just going straight in with the 220 grit since I received it from John's with the 180. So it made it very easy. And you already know this is the best part of the video. This is my second time using Odie's oil. I think I would have liked to use a water-based polyurethane on this, but I mean, as far as ease of use and durability, it's a great price, and I didn't really have a great setup for any finishes like that. So this is sped up quite a bit. Just taking a Scotch-Brite, just like how they explain on the website. It's very easy. You just take a Scotch-Brite pad and obviously make sure it's clean before you apply it. But I'm just applying small teaspoonfuls as I go, and as it becomes harder to work into the wood, I'm adding more. So it really makes the color pop. The only thing just to keep in mind if you're considering using it is that it does yellow the piece a little bit. You can kind of see that amberish tone, and I wanted to go with more of a neutral tone or a natural finish. So I do think if I could go back, I would have done a water-based polyurethane. But I mean, this transformation is awesome. I'm very excited at this point. Love the way the piece turned out. Saved a lot of time by going with this hard wax. And that is the finished product in the shop. All I got to do is install it. I did off camera install some C channels off the back, so I installed 2 of them. And that is the layout that's going to be in the office. That second piece is going to be on top of a cabinet I'm going to build. Don't mind the streak marks. It still needs to be completely buffed out, but just wanted to show a close-up of all the figuring. It's a beautiful piece. Now, I could use some help from you guys on kind of figuring out the direction of this channel. I've been in carpentry and woodworking since I was a kid, and I would like to go full-time eventually once I have everything set up and I have some good clients. I've done some carpentry work on my own before and built some furniture, and I mean, I love it so much. I want to make it a full-time career eventually. So start your comment with I want to learn if that's what you're looking for with these videos, and that's why you watch woodworking videos. But if you're kind of here just for entertainment purposes, maybe, I mean, me personally, I like watching woodworking videos before I go to sleep. It's kind of like reading a book. And if that's the case, then start your comment with for entertainment. And that'll help a lot learn how I can make videos that you guys are going to enjoy more. If you enjoyed the video, I have a lot of cool projects coming up. Hit that like button. Give me a subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next one. I'm going to be building the cabinet and showing the whole setup all together. It's going to be a really cool office transformation. I've listed all the product I've used, even some of the tools that I highly recommend for this project. So if you guys are already planning on getting something like this or were wondering what was the best product to use for certain things, I'd really appreciate it if you could use the link in the description below. It helps support me a little bit. These builds are pretty expensive, so anything helps. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.